Hi, I'm going to talk to you about the Personal and Professional Development Plan, Readiness for Practice level, and also about the Index of Evidence used for personal and professional development for Readiness level, both of which need to go into your Readiness for Practice portfolio at the end of this course. Now, I'm sure most of you would have started to work on your personal and professional development plan, so I just wanted to clarify some of the areas because I think it's been causing a little bit of confusion. Now, this development plan is a requirement, and you will bump into it at 3 different stages in your course. At the readiness stage, which is the stage that you're on, at the end of first placement level, and at the end of final placement level. And then you will take that into your ASYE once you've qualified. So it's good to start practicing how to complete this document now. It's quite straightforward, it's been changed recently, but you'll all be hopefully familiar with it. What I want to look at really is the section that lists your learning objectives. Now, this form replicates the same personal and professional development plan that you will be using in your ASYE year. So it's the same headings that is used. Your learning objective, they want to know how you will meet this objective, and specifically what development activity or action plan you're going to use in order to meet that objective. How will you know if the objective has been met? Timescales. When are you hoping to complete this objective? And what will be the impact on your development and practice as a result? So we'll have a look at that, and also at the end, the final review of your personal and professional development plan is a summary really, a summary of what you've achieved at this readiness to practice stage, and what are your emerging developmental needs that basically you will be taking on into placement with you as a result. This will go into your portfolio and your practice educator will see it, and they'll use it as a way to guide your learning in the initial weeks of your placement. And running alongside that is this document, the Index of Evidence, which again you will bump into on placement because it's a requirement that you document your evidence and that your practice educator sees the evidence of how you are demonstrating that you are meeting the various PCF domains, and your practice educator will sign off that evidence as good enough evidence to demonstrate that you've met that domain. So you need to be keeping an ongoing log of evidence of your learning, and again this is something that carries through throughout the whole course and into your ASYE year. So with your personal development plan, now we don't want reams, we're not expecting reams and reams and reams of information. So in the learning objective, perhaps one of your learning objectives would cover PCF 7, intervention and skills, and you need to be clear about the PCFs that you're covered in each of the things that you write down here. So for example, if one of your learning objectives was PCF 7, intervention and skills, it might be something like learning objective to improve my verbal communication. Okay? How will you meet this objective? Perhaps you might think, I'm going to facilitate an integrative seminar. That will help you improve your verbal communication. Okay, how will you know that this objective has been met? Perhaps you would get feedback from the group or feedback from the seminar tutor. That would be a concrete way of knowing whether your verbal communication has been clear, whether it's improved, or areas where you could develop. Timescales. So you might say, okay, I'm going to facilitate an integrative seminar and give the date of the seminar that you're hoping to facilitate. What was the impact on your development and practice? Well, it could be you've improved your verbal communication, or the impact has been that it's been highlighted that when you are verbally communicating within a group, you stutter because you're so nervous and so anxious. that is an impact. But then again, that's something that you could then go on to talk about, well, what are you going to do to improve that aspect of your communication and practice. Again, it could be that you address PCF level 3, which relates to diversity, and again make it clear what PCF you're hoping to cover. Which could be to, for example, the learning objective that you would cite, to understand the impact of power on vulnerable people in a social work role. That could be your learning objective. How will you meet this objective? Well, that could be from listening to the direct input from service user experiences on the Readiness to Practice course. That could, in fact, help you understand the impact of power, because you'll be speaking to somebody who has direct experience of the power that social workers wield over vulnerable people. How will you know if the objective is met? Well, perhaps there's an essay or a formative assignment that you're having to think about and complete, and it might be that you put that experience in your essay, that you actually write about that. And of course, that essay is going to be marked and you'll get feedback. And then you'll be able to gauge what the impact is on your development and your practice from the feedback from that essay. Okay? And you go on. Now, we don't want reams, like I say. What you need to do is develop a skill in picking out specific pieces of learning, because we don't want to kind of document every single lecture and every single integrative seminar, but it's about thinking about, you know, the previous week, what have been the key areas for me that have challenged me or that I've learned from. And if there are some key areas, then list those key areas. Don't just make a list of every single thing, okay? Now you've just done the reflective template on your role play. And we tried to make that template replicate this in some way. So you were asked about what some of the challenges were in doing that role play. You were asked about specific learning objectives, and you were asked about what are you going to do to meet those specific learning objectives. Now, if there's one or two of those objectives, then you can put them here, because it actually mirrors this document. Okay, so you can use that task to populate a couple of rows on this document. And I would say, really, you're really looking for 4 or 5 learning objectives, you know, key learning objectives that you can really think about and that you can take on to your first placement. And the final page is a summary. So where it says a summary of achievement of skills and knowledge, again, 3 or 4 bullet points is what we're looking for, of key areas of skills and knowledge that you think you have improved upon during this Readiness for Practice part of the programme. And the final section, emerging development needs to be carried forward to the next PDP, and that will be in your first placement. So, for example, that could be something like an emerging development need could be that you would like to gain an understanding of how different agencies undertake assessments. So you may have had a session, you will have a session about assessments, and you may want to take into your placement, okay, how does this, what are the different types of assessments that this agency does, and how do they undertake it? What kind of knowledge base and skills base do they require for you to undertake their assessment? That could be an emerging development need. Could also be how to use supervision effectively, because some of you may have little experience of supervision, whether in a work context or any context, in fact. So it could be an emerging development need, having had the session about supervision, to understand how to use this supervision effectively in a placement context. That could be an emerging development need that you're going to carry forward to your first placement. Or in fact, it could be how you would like to develop how you manage your anxiety in new situations, or when liaising with a range of different professionals or a range of different service users or vulnerable people that have got complex needs. Perhaps you get really, really anxious and nervous in new situations like that, and perhaps one of your developmental needs is, okay, I need to find strategies for how to actually deal with that. And you can find those strategies in your first placement, and you can discuss those with your practice educator. So that would actually be a point here that would go in this box. Okay? And that's pretty much the PDP. And running alongside that is the index of evidence. Now what we're really looking for here, again, are key areas of learning that you link to the PCF domain number that spans the whole readiness for practice period. So from the time you started the course until the time you go on placement, what are your key areas of learning? Okay, and again, we don't want reams and reams and reams. I would say between 12 and 15 points, and that within those 12 and 15 points, all 9 of the domains are actually covered. So you cover all 9 of the PCF domains, and we've populated it with 3 examples. So you can mention lectures as evidence of learning and what you've learned about. You can mention articles you've read, you can mention discussions that you've had in integrative seminars. As long as you're specific, what is the PCF domain number that you are saying this is evidence of learning of? What is the evidence? What is the date of that evidence? Okay? And don't restrict it to just, oh, this lecture or that lecture. There's lots of ways, I'm sure, that you are learning that isn't restricted to just lectures. So have a real think about the range of evidence that you could produce to demonstrate your learning. So it could be articles and books, it could be lectures, it could be discussions in integrative seminars, it could be an interesting documentary that you watched, it could be an interesting newspaper article that somehow links with a theme from a lecture, it could be a film that you've seen that links with some of the themes that you're learning about in lectures. So, you know, what we're looking for is a range of evidence to support your learning. And again, that replicates what you will bump into in placement, where your practice educator will be looking at the index of evidence regularly, that you will be keeping a running kind of summary and narrative of your learning, and your practice educator will actually be looking at that to verify the evidence. And it may come from shadowing colleagues, it may come from sitting in on a tribunal, it may come from actually your first one-to-one experience with a service user, a home visit, and out of that, evidence of learning may emerge, and those are the things that need to be documented.